A few years ago, when it was obvious that my father's life was nearing its end, that his death was imminent, I made a special point to go visit him. And that was a big deal for two reasons. One is that all the time that I've lived in the Northwest, he's been a resident in Southern California, so it's a distance, right? But also because we did have, over the last several decades, a strained relationship. Had to work hard at having a connection and a good relationship. And so when I got news of his failing health, I thought there's no way I'm not going to go, so I went. And one of the reasons I went was just because I love my dad, and I wanted not to have regrets later when he did pass away that I didn't go see him. But the other reason that I went was because I was concerned about where he was at spiritually, whether he had a relationship with Christ, whether he was going to spend eternity in heaven or not. I wanted my dad to be saved. I wanted him to know Jesus like I know Jesus. And so even though we talked about it many times over the years, my dad and I wasn't sure. And so I thought, when I'm with my father, I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to talk to him about Jesus and see where he's at. So we had a nice visit, and I did ask him, Dad, where you at? And he gave me some sort of church responses, said some things that were, more general. And I said, well, I'm not sure if you're understanding where I'm coming from. Dad, I want to know if you have a personal relationship with Jesus, like two people who are friends. Do you have that kind of a relationship with him? And my dad got emotional, which if you knew my dad, you'd realize that's a rarity in itself. But he got emotional, and with tears in his eyes, he said, yes. He was talking about Jesus. He said, yes, he's my buddy. And to know my dad, you knew that was him saying that he had a relationship with Jesus that was real. And of course, that was reassuring to my heart, and we concluded our time together, expressed our love, hugged, and we went away. And I spoke to him again on the phone, but never saw him again in person. And to this day, those words, he's my buddy, and what they meant and what they conveyed are just significant to me personally and memorable, so much so that it's as if I just heard him say that yesterday, even though it's been several years. Those were some of his last words to me. And that's how last words often go. They become famous sometimes because they are memorable, because they have significance, they have impact, they stick with us. And even as I tell you that story, I can think of several other instances in other relationships with other people where the last thing they said to me really has stuck with me. In some cases, it wasn't a good thing. What they said was something I wish they hadn't said. I wish that I hadn't heard it, but it is part of what they last communicated to me, and it has some staying power. I'm sure you can relate. You can think of situations, people that you've had relationships with, whether positive or negative or somewhere in between, that the last thing that they said or the last thing you remember, or the thing that had the most impact was a certain something that's really memorable and has stuck with you. That's the premise for this series, and today we're going to talk about the last words of Jesus. The last words of Jesus while he's alive, but before he's crucified. Now, of course, he rises from the dead, and he has lots to say after that, and I hope he's speaking into your life even today, but when he's hanging on the cross, when he's experiencing the last hours of his life on earth, when he's suffering for your sake and mine, when he's going through what he's going through, which is just unspeakable and unthinkable, what comes out of his mouth, I think, is particularly significant. And the Bible records for us 7 such statements or questions. And we're going to talk today about the 7 statements of Jesus. All 4 of the Gospels record a certain part of this, but no one Gospel records all of them. And so we're going to compile the 7 statements together, and we're only going to talk about half of them today. So I want to encourage you to come back next Sunday for part 2 of this series. There's just too much there for one time together. And so we're gonna focus on 2 different subsets or 2 different groupings of these 7 statements. And the way we're going to divide them up has to do with the identity of who Jesus is and the fact that the Bible reveals to us that he's fully God and fully man. Now, maybe you've heard that expression before. If you've hung around here any length of time, you've probably heard me say it. Jesus is fully God and fully man. And there's a theological implication there that's very real and very important. If he's not fully God, then his death on the cross means nothing, and your faith in him is wasted. If he's not fully man, his shed blood on the cross doesn't amount to anything, and your faith in him is a waste of time. In other words, for what he did on earth to be effective and for your faith in him to matter, he has to be both God and man in the fullest sense, both at the same time. Now that's pretty theological, that's pretty difficult for us to wrap our brains around, but it's true. The Bible makes it very clear. Both things are true of him. But we're going to focus on the practical application. Like we're going to answer the question, so what? So, all right, great. He's fully God, fully man. What does that mean to me? And for us here today, we're going to focus on primarily the idea that he's fully man. But let me just give you the 7 statements. Those that kind of express the fact that he's fully God are these. Father, forgive them. Only God can do that. Today, you'll be with me in paradise. That's something only God can promise someone. And then, my God, why have you forsaken me? We'll actually touch on that a little bit today, but more next week. And then finally, it is finished. What does that statement mean? It means everything. But today we're going to focus on the statements that express his humanity, that he's fully man. And there are these. Here is your son, here is your mother. What's that about? Well, he has a conversation with Mary, his mother, and John, one of his disciples. And then he also said, my God, why have you forsaken me? As an expression of his humanity, and we'll touch on that. Thirdly, into your hands I commit my spirit. And then finally, I am thirsty. One of the things that he said, one of the 7 things. So let's take the first of these that expresses the fact that he's fully man. And let's start with his statements to Mary and to John. When he said, here is your son, here is your mother. We find this account in John chapter 19, and here it is. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. A lot of Marys, right? And a whole lot of other people. There were a lot of onlookers that day, of course. This is a significant event. As gruesome as it was, as painful and unthinkable as his suffering was, and there were others being crucified as well, there were a lot of onlookers. And in this setting, Jesus notices that his mother is one of them. And it says, when Jesus saw his mother standing there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby. Now, John is the one writing this gospel, and that's his way of referring to himself. We touched on that a little bit last week. If you'd like to refer to yourself that way, that'd be great. I'm Craig, the disciple whom Jesus loves. That's not an arrogant statement. I'm not stating exclusivity because he also loves you just as much as he does me, so you can put your name in there and refer to yourself this way if you'd like to. John just loved to do this, especially as he's writing the account. He doesn't like to refer to himself in any other way, like as John or I. He just says the disciple whom Jesus loved, standing nearby. So he said to her, to Mary, woman, here is your son. Here's your son. And to the disciple, he said this, here is your mother. And from that time on, this disciple took her into his home. He had Mary come live with him. He had Jesus' mom come hang out at his house. Now, what's this all about? This is Jesus, obviously, caring for his mother. He gets the fact that, like any mother, this has got to be an agonizing experience for her to watch this happen. That's her boy. She gave birth to him. She cared for him when he was little. And now he's dying an unthinkable death. And Jesus, while he's suffering in this incomprehensible sort of environment, this event, this tragic and unthinkable event is taking place, and he's suffering the way that he is. In the midst of all that, he has the presence of mind to care for his mom. And so he makes arrangements. And I think it's interesting that he doesn't do this the night before. Hey, by the way, John, tomorrow's going to be kind of a busy day, and I don't want it to slip my mind. So, could you kind of take mom under your wing kind of thing? He doesn't do it the night before or the week before or even months before. It's while he's hanging on the cross, literally in the last few hours of his life, and he has the presence of mind to make a powerful statement to you and me. And what he's saying is, family matters. And he doesn't just model that for us. He's communicating to you and me today that your family matters. It should matter to you. It matters to him. And even in the midst of great suffering and anguish, physically and spiritually, Jesus makes a powerful and bold statement. But also he models for us and instructs us in another way, because what he's saying to us is how important it is, even in the midst of our great suffering and struggle, to be focused on others. I don't know about you, but I can't even imagine being on the cross and going through what Jesus went through. But I can imagine this, that if I were going through that, there'd be only one person I'd be thinking about. Me, right? I've had 5 eye surgeries in the last 20 or 22 months. And each time I've had an eye surgery, you go under general anesthesia and you go into recovery and then you get sent home. And the whole time, all I'm thinking about, the number one thing on my mind, the only thing on my mind, me, right? I hurt, I can't see, I hate this, can't wait to get home, I need to be comfortable, bring me something to drink, hey, leave me alone, I'm crabby, I'm just, because I'm going through a hard time. Well, it's nothing compared to what Jesus went through, and yet in the midst of what he's going through, he has the presence of mind to be focused on 2 other people, his mother Mary and John, his follower. There's something powerful in that for you and for me, that no matter how hard it's getting, no matter how hard it is, no matter what you're facing, it's still and always is appropriate to be focused on others. In fact, there's something therapeutic about that. You can pay a psychiatrist or a counselor a lot of money to tell you what I just told you, and I'm offering it to you for free. Going through a rough time? Think about somebody else. Get your mind off yourself. It will help you, and it will be a blessing to them. So Jesus models that for us, and it's an amazing thing. But that's just one of the 4 things we're going to look at today. The next one is this: I'm thirsty. I just love this. I'm thirsty. It's such a human thing, right? But I also am intrigued by the fact he doesn't say I hurt, because he did. He doesn't say I'm hungry. He probably was. What he says is I am thirsty. And here's the account. It's in the next verse in John 19. It says, later, knowing that everything had now been finished, and so that scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, I am thirsty. And when he says that, he's telling us this so powerfully and practically. He's telling us that he knows what it's like to be human. I don't know if you've ever really let your mind go there much, but I've often thought about Jesus. The Christmas story, born in a manger and all that, nice and cute, wrapped in swaddling clothes. But eventually he had to be cared for just like any baby, right? He had to be burped and have his diaper changed and all the stuff that goes with little babies. And he had to grow up as a little boy and then a young man. And so his mother Mary is caring for him in all these contexts and settings. And he gets thirsty and he gets hungry and he gets tired, knows what sleeplessness is all about. And I would imagine if he's like any of the rest of us who get this way, when we get hungry, we get cranky, right? We get hangry, right? Anybody get hangry when you get, it's like, give me something to eat. My blood sugar is dropping like a rock. And it's like, Jesus probably experienced those kinds of things. He knew what it was to be human, and he's clearly communicating that to us while he's hanging on the cross. It's easy for us to spiritualize, the Son of God hanging on the cross, dying for the sin of the human race, all of which is true, but he's a human being going through that experience as well. Well, that's 2 of the 4 we're going to look at. Let's take a look at the one that's going to show up today and also next Sunday, and that's this. It's a part of him being fully man. And he has this moment where he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Now, the account of that can be found, among other places, in Mark 15, verse 33, and it says this: at noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. Noon to 3 hours. Darkness. Like the middle of the day when it should be the brightest, it's the darkest. What's going on? This is the only time in all of eternity that Jesus is going to experience what he's experiencing for these 3 hours. And I mean all in eternity. From eternity past, from before time was, he who has always existed, always enjoyed unbroken fellowship with the Father. And for all of eternity future, beyond the end of time, Jesus will enjoy unbroken fellowship with the Father. Only one time, for about 3 hours, he experiences what it feels like to be separated from the Father. And why is that? It's because of sin, your sin and mine, and the sin of the whole human race being placed on him. Sin causes separation, and Jesus is feeling that separation for the first time ever, and it's new to him, and in his humanity, he cries out, Father, where did you go? Something changed. Something's different. You feel distant. Why have you forsaken me? And the account is in Mark 15, verse 34. It says that at the third hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, and this is Aramaic, so just bear with me, I'll butcher it for you. Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, or something like that, which is Aramaic, which is interesting that he would use the Aramaic, and in declaring that, he's saying this, translated, my God, why have you forsaken me? Now, has God forsaken Jesus? Absolutely not. In fact, God is orchestrating the events that are taking place. The Father's looking on intently, and there's nothing out of his control. He is hands-on in every way. Why? Because the redemption of the human race is playing out in real terms on earth and in heaven. Something powerful and significant is happening. God is not on a coffee break. God is not checked out, even though it feels that way to Jesus. And what that tells us is this, that when you and I feel that way, I know you've felt that way before. Like, where is God when I need him? Or I went through that thing last month or last year or 5 years ago or 20 years ago, and where was God? When I needed him most, he didn't seem to be there. Or maybe you're feeling that right now. It's just like, I feel so distant from God. I used to feel closer. I've never felt closer, whatever. But right now, just like God's a million miles away. Seems like he's detached, unengaged, like he doesn't care about me. And the fact of the matter is, he absolutely does. And I know that because he promised that he would never leave us and he would never forsake us. He would never check out on us. He would never give up on us. He is always going to be there. And he tells us that and promises that to us over and over again, Old Testament and New Testament. So the fact is, he's there. But the other fact is, sometimes it doesn't feel like it. And I've been there. I know what it is to feel distance. To feel let go or let down or abandoned. And Jesus would say to you and me today, I know what that feels like too. I get it. I know what it's like. I know what you're going through. I know how lonely it is walking where you happen to be walking right now. Well, that's 3 of the 4 we're going to look at. Here's the 4th one that tell us that he's really, truly human, fully man. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Now, this is recorded for us in Luke 23, verse 46. Now, take a look closely at what it says. It says, Jesus called out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And watch what the next part of it says. When he had said this, what? He breathed his last. If not the very last words, certainly close to the last words ever to be uttered by him prior to his death, are words that express trust. And I think it's a powerful example to us, a profound thing that after he experiences the loneliness and the agony, the sense of abandonment that causes him to cry out in his humanity, Father, where'd you go? He turns right around, even though that's what he was feeling, and says, I don't know where you went. I'm not sure what's happening. I don't like how it feels right now, but I'm still going to trust you. Into your hands I commit my spirit. It's easy for us to look back on that and say, oh yeah, it was Jesus. Probably wasn't that hard for him. No, that's the point today. It was hard. He was human. He is human. He knows what it's like to be you and me and live the lives that we're living. And he knows what it is all about when God feels distant and yet you turn around and choose to trust him anyway. And that's what he's doing here. Into your hands I commit my spirit. This doesn't feel good. This has not been pleasant. That's an understatement. This has been torturous and painful and agonizing, both physically and spiritually and in every other way. And I'm very, very glad it's just about over. But I just know this, that I can trust you, and I'm choosing to do exactly that. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. 4 different things come out of Jesus' mouth when everything's on the line, when he's suffering for you and me. And he has the presence of mind to have those things and the others we'll look at next week running through his heart and mind and then being expressed in these very poignant expressions. All of which tells you and me, guess what? We have a Savior in heaven who gets us. And that's why we read these verses in Hebrews chapter 4. It says this, therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. Now, hold on just a second. I don't know if that strikes you the way it strikes me, but that seems pretty lofty, right? Like pretty spiritually correct. Like sounds like it's kind of a high-sounding sort of thing. Jesus, a great high priest who ascended into heaven, the Son of God, It's like there's some things about that I find difficult to relate to. And we'll get to that next week. But I love that is the premise or the basis for what comes next. Watch this. Verse 15. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses. We don't have a high priest who doesn't get it. We don't have a high priest who's up there but never was down here. A high priest who experienced that but never experienced this. We have a high priest, actually, who has experienced this. We have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are. But with one very significant difference. Yet he did not sin. You and I do. We have. There's no perfect people on this planet. The only perfect person ever to live was Jesus himself. None of the rest of us even come close. But he was tempted in all the ways we are. He dealt with all the stuff we deal with. He experienced the temptations that are associated with being in the presence of fear and doubt and sin and the kinds of things that we often fall prey to. But Jesus faced all that, did not sin, but knows what it's like to face that stuff and to feel that stuff, to experience that stuff, and yet say no to that stuff. And because he's been there, tempted in every way just as we are, because he's experienced that, it qualifies him for us personally as someone we can come to and know that he relates to us. He gets us. Let's finish out the passage. The next verse, verse 16, says this. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with what? Everybody say it. Say it again. Confidence. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. This is a powerful statement. The throne that Jesus is sitting on is here referred to as a throne of grace. And far too often we think about coming to Jesus with the thing that we need help with, the thing we're going through, the stuff and we think that his is a throne of judgment. It's not. It will be one day. It's not. Sometimes we think it's a throne of condemnation or a throne of rebuke or whatever runs through our minds. We get some strange ideas about how we're going to be received when we come to him with our needs and our failures and our frailty and our humanity and our brokenness. This tells me that I can come before his throne confidently because here's what I'll get. Here's what I can expect. This is what I can count on. It's a throne of grace, and I'm going to receive mercy and find grace to help me in my time of need. I can't tell you how many times I've been at a certain point in my journey with Jesus, trying to follow him, fall on my face, experience doubts and fears, get off track, and then it's like, I need to come to Jesus. I need some help here, and I know he's the person I need to turn to, but I don't know what I'm going to get. I feel ashamed. I feel like I've let him down. I feel like I'm going to be judged or reprimanded or rebuked or in some way condemned. And then I remember this verse, and I remember, no. Jesus wants me to come to him, and he wants me to come confidently, knowing that what I'm going to get from him is grace and mercy and help in my time of need. And you know what? That's exactly what you'll get every time you come to him. And he's inviting you to come to him today, right now, this afternoon and tomorrow. And he was there for you last week and last month, and those other times you didn't come to him. He was there offering help, offering grace, offering mercy, trying to help you, wanting to help you in your time of need. See, here's what's true. Jesus doesn't just sympathize with us. He knows what it's like to be us. Huge difference. See, when I was 15, my parents got divorced, and it's part of the reason I had such a strained relationship with my father. And I remember talking to some of my friends, and it's like, things are going on, and it's like I'm feeling, and I don't know what to do, and it's just like really caught me off guard. And I realized as I'm talking to them, they don't get it. And they say, well, yeah, gosh, that sucks. That's too bad. Gosh, I'm sorry you're going through that. I understand what you're feeling. And I'm saying, no, you don't. Your parents are still together. Your home's solid. Mine's not. Your home's together. Mine's broken. And it's the same kind of thing if you're going through, like, say, for example, grief. And you've lost a loved one, and you're experiencing something, maybe for the first time in your life, where someone that close to you is gone, and you start talking to somebody else, and they sympathize with you, but they don't necessarily get it unless they've been there and lost a loved one. And you find somebody like that, and you're drawn to them. You gravitate toward them. It's like, hey, could we have coffee? Can we spend a few minutes? I understand. You understand. I know you get it. You understand where I'm at. And, man, I just need somebody to talk to who gets me, who understands me, who's been where I'm walking right now. And we're drawn to those people. Well, Jesus is that person. One of the things that makes him so attractive, that we're drawn to him so compellingly, is the fact that he does get us. And when we begin to realize that he really, really gets us, that he knows what it's like to be us, that he's been human, that he's been there, that he's experienced it all, like, man, that's who I want to talk to, somebody who gets it. And his name happens to be Jesus. And he happens to be sitting on a throne. And he happens to be sitting on a throne that is a throne of grace and of mercy. He happens to be sitting on a throne, and yet at the same time, by his Holy Spirit, marvel of marvels, dwells. He's by his Spirit dwelling in the hearts of everyone who are his followers, everyone who said yes to him. He's dwelling in my heart by his Spirit, yet sitting on a throne of grace. And now he invites me to come to him and get help. Come confidently and get help. Sometimes my prayer, in fact, more often than you might think, my prayer is one word. Help. Sometimes I say it with a particularly high-pitched voice, help. And once in a while I expand that prayer and it becomes two words. Help me. And then I get really elaborate, and I expand it to three words. Jesus, help me. And there's something about it, just a sincere cry. Cry for help. When it's rooted in the confidence that comes from knowing that the one you're coming to is fully man, that he was fully human, that he lived this life here, and he gets it, and he gets you personally, and me personally. Something about that draws us to him and makes it possible for us to come with confidence. Let me ask you this question in conclusion. What do you need Jesus' help with today? What is it? You know, for some of us, it's family issues. I mean, you don't have to raise your hand, but are you having family issues? I've had my share of them. With my immediate family, my parents' divorce, and my brothers, and all that stuff. There's a whole long history there. But even with our own sons and their wives and some of the stuff that happens in any family, even the best of families, there's just family stuff, right? There are issues. There are problems to work through and times to express forgiveness and understanding. And, you know, maybe that's where you're at. You got family issues. Maybe it's your husband or your wife or your ex or your mother-in-law. Maybe it's your cousin or your third cousin 2 times removed. I don't know who it is. Somebody in your extended family, somebody that claims to be family that's not. Do you have family issues? Jesus, the one who sits on the throne of grace, wants to help you with those because he gets it. He knows what it is to put a priority on family. He knows how important that is. Maybe it's not a family issue at all. Maybe for you, it's just God feels distant. When we were talking about that, maybe you're like, yeah, that's me. I just feel like he's on an extended break, like on a sabbatical or something. He's checked out, coffee break, long, absence, leave of absence or something. Where is he? He used to feel near, or maybe he's never felt near. And I hear other people talk about this, just like, and you're thinking, I just don't know I want him to feel near. Jesus knows what you're feeling. He's felt that. Remember, my God, why have you forsaken me? He gets it. He understands it. It matters to him, and he wants to help you with that if you'll come confidently before his throne to receive grace and mercy and help in time of need. Maybe it's not that at all. Maybe it's a financial thing or a health issue. Or maybe it's the kind of thing that involves a friendship or a relationship or your employment or your work environment or something in the neighborhood. Or just maybe what you need help with is something that's far less specific, but very real. Something that's more nuanced or maybe complicated, but that you can't quite explain. I've been there before where it's just like, I don't know quite what's going on, but I know that what I'm feeling at least is real, and it's raising some questions, and I'm having some struggles, and I don't know quite what to do with how I'm feeling, and I don't know what steps to take to move forward or get beyond this, and I need some help, and I only know one person ultimately that can help me with this, and he understands it, because I certainly don't, and his name is Jesus, so I come confidently to him and say, Lord, help. And maybe that's you right now. It's like, maybe you're thinking, yeah, that's it. It's like, you can't really describe it, but it's real, and it's plaguing you. Maybe your thing is just some sin in your life that needs to be dealt with. And it's just this pattern of defeat. You fall on your face, you ask his forgiveness, you get back up, you fall on your face, and it's just like, is there any hope of breaking out of this pattern and living a different kind of life as I follow Jesus? And the answer is yes, and there's help, and the help is available in the person of Jesus Christ. He just wants you to come. Come and ask for his help. Ask for his help. Come confidently to a throne that is a throne of grace and mercy and ask for his help. Well, I can't imagine us talking about this for about 30 minutes or so. I can't imagine us concluding our time without coming to him and asking for help together. I mean, I think I'd be remiss in not just making time available for us to do exactly that. So I'm going to go to him. I'm going to ask for help for me, and I'm going to ask for help for you, and I'd just like to invite you to join me as we pray. And I want to ask you just to consider closing your eyes so you're not distracted by whatever else is going on in the room. And let's just come before his throne. Jesus, we come before you.